Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thursday, not our second Wednesday webinar, but a really special webinar where we are highlighting DIBEL's newest curriculum, Emerging Relationships, Preparing for Healthy Relationships. We're very excited to have y'all here and to be able to highlight this new program that you will be able to hopefully start using with your young people very soon. So I want to get into the technical questions so that we have the majority of the time for the authors to present this webinar to you and you can learn more about the program. Basic technical stuff. If you can't hear the presentation, if you're having difficulties, please exit the webinar and then either come back in, or you can opt to call in on your phone. That tends to solve most audio problems, either the reboot or calling in on the phone. Additionally, if you've got questions, we'll be monitoring the chat box. We have some time at the end where we will address any questions that you have. Please locate that questions box in your control panel, and you can type your questions in there for us to answer as we near the end of today's session. So I do want to take a moment to introduce the authors of the program before they come on and tell you more about themselves and about the curriculum. We've got Dr. Alyssa McElwain. She is an associate professor of human development and family studies at the University of Wyoming. She has a research focus on adolescent and emerging relationships, with a focus, probably not surprisingly, on preventative relationship education programs. She has a large and very exciting history and experience with peer-led relationship education programming, and I think you will all see that in this program. We also have Dr. Vanessa Finnegan. She's the Director of Assessment and Strategic Planning at Auburn University. She also serves as adjunct graduate level faculty in Auburn University's Educational Foundations Leadership and Technology Department. She also has over a decade of experience in the management, planning, implementing, and evaluation of federally funded relationship education programs. She also has extensive experience in school and community-based programming and training educators. So the two of them came together to use all of this experience to create our newest program, Emerging Relationships, that is really going to fill a void that we all heard from you as being in the field. So I will go ahead and turn it over to them to talk about their program.
Right. Hello, everyone. I know Alyssa and I are so excited to be on with you today. So thank you to Rachel and DIBEL for hosting us and having this opportunity for us to introduce all of you to Emerging Relationships. Alyssa and I developed this curriculum, using the research. It is research informed. It is based on science, but we also wrote it wearing that facilitator hat. We have a lot of experience over a decade each in the classroom, facilitating programming to young people. And there was like these two themes of feedback over the years. And one has always been that we need healthy relationship education programming that can be brief. And brief can mean, can we fit this in under an hour? Can we fit that in the period, that 15-minute period that a lot of schools function under in a schedule? Or, we have an after school program. We only have students here for a couple of hours, but we have so many competing demands on time. So you'll see that in this program, there are 6 lessons and they're about 45 minutes each. Another big feedback that we've heard over the years is, coming from facilitators and teachers that do relationship programming or youth prevention programming for can we have this for younger students? Can we have this for our younger people? And students themselves say things like, oh, I wish I would have had this when I was younger. It's kind of funny because you're like, oh, you're in 9th grade. But, we've just gotten that feedback. And so it's really exciting to have had the opportunity to design a program that does meet that need for healthy relationship education programming for our younger age groups. Emerging Relationships is specifically aiming about the 5th to 6th grade period of adolescence, so about 10 to 12-year-olds. We've got 6 lessons, or about 45 minutes each. It is rooted in the positive youth development framework. So youth will learn skills to enhance their understanding, not only of themselves, but how to contribute to having healthy relationships with friends, their peers, and they're going to learn different skills in self-regulation and leadership. And then we also considered, again, those demands of real-world settings. So what are those teaching requirements, things like Aaron's Law and meeting health education standards. So this program does all of that, so it is ready to go to be implemented. I'd like to share with you here more about our learning outcomes. And so our programming, as I mentioned, is rooted in the positive youth development framework. This framework is strengths-based, and it takes this optimistic view for adolescent development. And so it is already being utilized in different youth prevention programming that are used like with 4-H or teen outreach programming. So it is commonly used. And as you can see here, we have the 6 lessons, and each of the lessons correlates to one of the 6 key principles. Sometimes you might have heard these principles referred to as the 6 C's. So it's a very holistic approach to promoting positive youth development, and the program fosters the 6 C's, which are the competence, confidence, character, connection, caring, and contribution. And so we, as the educators facilitating the program, or community leaders partnering with others to facilitate the program and bringing out to young people, can use this as a resource to really support young people in making a positive contribution to their communities and society. So what's the science behind the lessons? Each lesson in our curriculum is supported by current developmental science. We know that early adolescence is this time period between ages 10 and 12. It's a big time period for transition, and our young people are going from childhood and transitioning into adolescence. And so during this time, our young people are beginning to explore their sense of self. They're having a greater desire for independence. At the same time, their ability to control their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors really begins to improve, but they can use the extra support. And we know that with practice, what the science shows us is that they can improve, they can strengthen their ability to self-regulate. And so with that in mind, with so many changes occurring, it's an exciting time, but it can also be a stressful time. So self-regulation, which is the ability to control one's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, has been shown to be linked with many positive outcomes for adolescents and even into adulthood. And so that's a major component of our program. So we have built self-regulation into every lesson in multiple ways. We do that by encouraging the facilitator and student connection. We have a power pause, which is based on practicing emotional regulation and awareness of your breath and awareness of emotion. We focus on goal setting and intentionality. And so all of this together, the research really shows that this is a skill that can be improved with practice, and this is a prime opportunity to build that skill. This is also a time period where youth are experiencing significant brain development. Specifically, there's pruning, synaptogenesis happening. And so we want to empower youth to understand their own development, to understand their own bodies. And so we shared knowledge with them, and you'll see that in lesson 3 about their brain development and how they can practice strategies to really have them have more helpful thoughts and behaviors. And then also in each lesson, there's a component where we want youth to build connection. So we want them to build connection with their peers, building connection with the program facilitator, but also building a connection outside of your program time. And so we have our champion, who is someone in their life that they trust, an adult that is there for them, or even that they can look up to. And so this is based on the research, which shows that having a trusted adult in a young person's life really makes a big difference for adolescents' resiliency. And so we wanted to bring that in. And then lastly, with the self-determination theory, we look at the 3 important psychological needs that we all need as individuals to really have our needs met and to be well. And those are competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And so we see in the research that when these needs are met, young people have greater motivation. They have greater well-being. They can be more productive. And so we incorporated that into the lessons too by teaching youth competent decision-making and how to build positive relationships and build their own character to strengthen their overall wellness and to meet the psychological needs as well. We believe that the facilitator are truly the key to success. And so the facilitator is a very big part of this curriculum and program. And throughout the program, you will see that we rely on developing a positive classroom climate and positive facilitator-student connections. And so in every lesson, there are multiple opportunities for that. Because again, we can't say or stress enough how important we believe the facilitator is for building that key to success. And so there are lots of interactions between facilitator and students, and having the facilitator really model healthy relationship skills and that self-regulation piece, and that is all scripted throughout. And we did this because we know that adults who are interacting with young people, so parents, teachers, coaches, program facilitators, who are modeling self-regulation, are helping the students to develop these skills through their modeling. And so there are many opportunities for that throughout the program. And you'll see that's referred to as co-regulation, which has recently become a very important aspect of healthy relationship education programs for youth. On this slide, you will see our key lesson elements. And so review and reflect, we incorporated this in every lesson because the science shows us that it's a best practice. You know, repetition really is a key to learning. And so at the beginning of every lesson, there's an opportunity to review what students learned in the previous lesson and to discuss and just kind of pick back up, like, okay, last time we talked about this, how does that, you know, dive into the new material that we're learning in the next session. There's also a student journal that goes along with the curriculum, and throughout each lesson there's an opportunity for students to engage by reflecting. You know, some students don't want to share their thoughts, feelings, ideas out loud, so this is just another opportunity to engage with the material through a different way, a modality with the journals. We have a facilitator connection that's built into every lesson. And this is really essential because, again, you as facilitators and whoever's doing the program are considered the key to success. And so we ask that the facilitator, as part of their prep, do some reflection and ask themselves, you know, what were my experiences at this age? And then, again, there's just a great deal of research and education about that connection and how important it is when your facilitator is relatable and is genuine, and it shows their personality throughout the lessons, and the programming can really build a positive learning environment. We also have a power pause, and so if you are already familiar a little bit with the power of mindfulness-based stress reduction, you'll recognize how important it is to, you know, take a pause when feeling emotionally overwhelmed. And so we included this element so that students can learn an empowering skill that they have access to, you know, long after the program concludes. And because our students typically at this age are tech savvy, we thought that they could relate to the idea of like powering up or hitting pause on a game when they need to take a break. And then we also include a lesson takeaway. So similar to that review and reflect that happens at the beginning, we close every lesson with a review of what was learned and a reflection on, you know, what's the takeaway, what stood out for them. And then lastly, we have a champion connection, again, based on that research of positive youth development and that prevention science, which really shows us that youth who have strong positive relationships with a trusted adult in their lives tend to fare better. And so we built in an opportunity, which we call the champion connection, to build that relationship outside of program time. And what we'll do today, next, we're going to just give you a brief overview of each of the 6 lessons, and we will demonstrate one of these key lesson elements in each of our lessons. Lesson 1, here we go. So we start off with an I am statement, and lesson 1 is I am intentional, and it aligns with the positive youth development principle of character. What it means for us is that, you know, character development involves the cultivation of ethical and moral qualities such as integrity and responsibility and empathy, and having a sense of fairness. And so the aim of lesson 1 is really to begin to build that strong groundwork of trust and having protective elements through cultivation of knowledge and self-regulation skills in young people. And so they're going to identify goals, they're going to assess their own roles and contributions to have cohesiveness within the group setting, and they're going to learn more about, you know, pro-social goals as an instrument to fostering healthy relationships and improving relationships. So the concept of setting intentions is introduced in this lesson. This is to help reinforce that we want to take ownership of what we contribute, what we put out, what we're doing. And when we're setting a goal, to meet that goal, we have to be very intentional about our thoughts and our actions and to meet that goal. And so this is also reinforced with making a classroom commitment and setting individual intentions. So it's twofold. And then we also introduced the concept of the champion connection. So at the very beginning, we're saying, let's go ahead and identify who this person is. And it's okay if you don't know who this person is, let's talk, because we're gonna make sure you have that person. And maybe sometimes that person is a mentor, the program facilitator themselves. And so we want them we start off at the beginning of the program by making that connection with their champion. So here you can see an example of a champion connection, and it just starts off with like, hey, let's keep the conversation going. So it's meant to be brief, it's meant to be conversational, and I'll just demonstrate here a couple of the prompts for conversation. So in lesson 1, you can see here that we're encouraging students to go out and like tell your champion about the program, tell them what you're doing. It's so hard, like you have young people in your life, you're like, how was your day? What did you do? What did you learn? This is an opportunity to tell that person who is maybe curious about your life and is asking you about your day, tell them about the program, tell them what you learned today. And then I encourage you, and we'll just take like 30 seconds, just as a champion for young people, think to yourself how you would answer the questions, what is a happy memory you have of being this age? And if you could go back in time, what is one piece of advice that you would give yourself when you were this age? So the young person would then, have these as an ideas to ask and share. And as a program facilitator, you would want to be thinking about these things too. And so lesson 2, please. That is next. I am caring is lesson 2. And in this lesson, we align with the positive youth development principle of caring. And so the objective here in this lesson is to cultivate emotional competence and empathy. This lesson, now that we have built the trust, we have the ground rules, we have a commitment to each other, we're being intentional, we like lay that foundation in lesson 1. Now we're gonna go a little further, we're gonna go a little deeper. We're gonna start connecting with emotions and developing some awareness of feelings and the feelings of others and how my feelings and behaviors impact others. So we know from the science that students' ability to articulate their feelings and identify their emotions is really helpful, and encouraging a sense of empathy and concern for others is also really important for positive youth development. So sometimes it's as simple as like, I need the word to describe what it is that I'm feeling, or being able to recognize in my peer, my friend, what they're feeling. And so we work through understanding how my feelings and my behaviors can impact others, and we do that to build a sense of social responsibility as well. And again, based in the science, children in school and early adolescence, especially at this age, is 10 to 12 period, they're processing, they're learning how to manage their emotions, and they can improve in managing their emotions. They need the words to also help articulate those emotions. And that can also help with their decision making. Like, what do I do with those feelings? What do I do when I see others? How does my behavior impact others? And cultivating more well-being and healthy relationships. So in lesson 2, we start by having an overview of emotions. We want to help young people understand, what emotions are, what they might look like, why it's important. And then feelings wheel, and this just gives them an opportunity to see, there's these kind of basic emotions that you see here kind of in the center of the wheel. So like happy, scared, anxious, sad, mad. Those can be a little bit easier to identify, or maybe they can be expressed. If someone's, smiling really big and really happy, then we can be like, oh, they seem happy. Or someone is crying, okay, I see feelings of sadness. So, but as we branch out on the outside of the wheel, we can see that there are a lot more emotions and there's this greater range. So For example, if you're feeling sad, is it that you're really feeling lonely or not understood? If on the outside someone seems angry, maybe it could be that they're feeling disrespected. And so we start identifying emotions and talking through what that might look like, and also a range of emotions in a day. Okay, so this is the power pause, and this is the icon that we use. And in lesson 2 is when the program introduces the power pause. And so it looks like this, and it's an opportunity to pause, let go, and just refocus. So it can also be used for classroom management. This can be a helpful tool for young people to regain power over themselves, and so that they can be in charge of themselves and really regulate their own feelings, behaviors, thoughts. And we walk through how they can use it whenever they need it, and it is scripted for the facilitator to walk their students through. And so, for example, it will take 1 minute. That is it. We have a minute at the end, and they're scripted a little differently each time. So for example, in lesson 2, we ask students to stand up tall, put their hands and fists on their hips. They can close their eyes, or they can just pick a spot to look. They breathe in 1, 2, 3, and then out 1, 2, 3, and then we go a little further. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, then out 1, 2, 3, 4. They take one last deep breath in, 1 out, and then we just say, breathe normally. And then we have them go through a phrase. So we ask them to say it back to themselves. So I am caring towards myself. And then they repeat that to themselves. I am caring towards myself. I am caring towards others. And we do this, again, to reinforce the concepts at the end of the lesson.
Thanks, Vanessa, for starting us off with those lessons and that great program overview. I think you'll continue to see some of these themes throughout the next lessons. So I'm going to talk about the 3rd lesson, which is called I Am Awesome. So just like that, power pause really helps to empower youth to understand how they're feeling and kind of take back their emotions and get in control of them. We're hoping to empower youth in this lesson 3. So this lesson aligns with positive youth development principle of confidence. So what that means to us is developing a positive and realistic sense of self-worth and self-efficacy. So it involves helping young people believe in their abilities and recognize their strengths. So young people in the preteen phase, as we may all be aware, are commonly dealing with issues related to how they see themselves, how they feel about themselves, and dealing with some social hurdles. And the beginning of puberty, we know from research, is linked to potential challenges in various areas, like in their social life, emotionally, and with mental health. So equipping pre-adolescents with knowledge and skills can really act as a shield against future issues and reduce risky behaviors in the future. So building confidence and well-being at this stage is going to provide a crucial protective factor or buffer throughout adolescence, influencing how they might be accepted, supported, and influenced in their peer group. So in this lesson, we seek to really empower them with knowledge, educating them about the changes that they may be experiencing currently or undergoing soon in the future. So this way that they can feel more positively, that they can take control over their bodies and minds and their social relationships as they grow up. So throughout, the facilitators, again, are going to connect with the students and really share their own personal examples that show positive self-image and self-esteem within the facilitator's own mind. So overall, we wanted to focus on 4 domains of development that are experiencing multiple changes during early adolescence. And so we focus on how they can be awesome in each of these areas. So in regards to emotions, we talk about how they feel positively or negatively about themselves and what that looks like for them. And then we focus on their brain, their minds, and how their brain can be a very powerful tool for thinking certain things about themselves, right? So that they could choose to have positive affirmations for themselves with positive self-esteem, or there's a potential that they're breaking themselves down and they're making themselves feel worse when they make a mistake, let's say. So I'll go into this brain power idea a little bit more when I share an activity that we do in that lesson. But the third thing that we cover is physical development. So talking about how throughout puberty, everybody's bodies change, everyone gets more hairy. But in general, it's important to recognize that the physical appearance of your body is just one aspect of you as a person. And so it's important to sort of recognize what's internal to you. That's also really important. And say that they do an activity in their student journal outlining what they see in themselves that maybe you can't see from the outside. Finally, we have them practice some social skills, just very basic social skills that we think will help them in the future to initiate friendships. So just basic introductions, chit chat, to hopefully just boost up their confidence and their abilities to make new friends. So next I want to show you just generally what this activity would look like. Throughout the program, we really try to do a lot of active learning. So within this activity, all the students will stand up in a circle and put their arms in like goalposts next to them, and they're going to spread a message by high-fiving their neighbor. So the teacher will say go, and they have to high-five each other around the room, and when it returns to the starting point, the teacher will record the time that it took. They do this multiple rounds with the end goal of them improving overall. So there's a follow-up discussion about this, like, do you think you improved in your times? The teacher will share what the improvement was, and why do you think this happened? Why did you get faster with time? And generally the idea is that your brain gets more powerful with practice. So just like for all of you, I suspect that you might have lost some of the brain connections that you developed when you were younger, and you may have solidified some connections now in your adulthood. This is called pruning and synaptogenesis, and these two brain processes are in full force during especially early adolescence. And so we know that if you don't use it, you lose it, and what you want to practice will become more commonplace. So we want to focus on that idea with youth, that the more they practice these positive thoughts about themselves, the more ingrained they're going to be in their minds. All right. So the next thing that I want to show you is our key lesson element called review and reflect. So this would happen during lesson 4. So after we'd finished lesson 3 about all these domains of development, we would move on to lesson 4, but before getting started, so before I talk about it, we basically would go over the classroom commitment and ask some process questions related to that. How are we doing? What could we do better? And this really serves as a key checkpoint to help with self-regulation, meaning they can examine how their own behavior has impacted the group. They can identify whether the group is making progress towards a goal. So it really is in line with that idea of self-regulation. So we built that in a structured way. As Vanessa mentioned, repetition is the key to learning. And so therefore there is a built-in review piece before each lesson begins. So this is just the example from lesson 3. So what are the ways you can build a healthy body and mind? And what did you learn from talking with your champion? So really checking in, like, how did that conversation go and what did you talk about? Then we do a check-in with that feel wheel. So asking them how they feel at the moment, which really is just a nice pause for everybody to take a moment and identify how they're feeling before we get started with the lesson content. So right now, I'm feeling so grateful that all of you are here and really excited about this new program, and we're so excited to share it with you. So with that in mind, let's move on to the content that would happen in lesson 4. Lesson 4 is called I Am a Friend. So this is where we really dive into the characteristics of healthy and unhealthy relationships. I'm sure you were all expecting this to be a part of the program. So this lesson is going to align with the positive youth development principle of connection. So what this means to us is that building positive relationships and social connections is really crucial for youth development. That includes all sorts of relationships, with family, peers, teachers, or other supportive adults, like maybe their champion in this program. Being connected contributes to a sense of belongingness and emotional well-being. So overall, this lesson aims to educate youth about the fundamental aspects of healthy relationships. So we're equipping them with important knowledge and skills. So to put these teachings or these ideas into practice, they use that information in an active learning group activity to collaborate and problem solve together to reinforce the concepts that they're learning. So overall, that activity in particular really helps foster positive peer relationships and helps them identify the signs and characteristics of healthy or unhealthy relationships. So we call these healthy and unhealthy. We refer to them as sunny versus stormy relationships. So we begin the lesson with a brainstorm about sunny versus stormy relationships. And these ideas came about because sunshine makes us feel warm, comfortable, and friendships that have a lot of sun in them or they're sunny are going to be filled with positive memories, laughter, joy, and lots of things that are just good and make you feel kind of warm and fuzzy. So a stormy relationship, when we think of storm clouds, we're thinking it's cold or perhaps risky or dangerous, could cause damage in our lives. And so we need to be on the lookout for these traits of stormy relationships. So the teacher will explain each of the traits of sunny relationships to help students get an idea clearly of what things should go into a happy, positive relationship. And then they talk about different characteristics of stormy relationships, things like, you know, they're mean to you all the time, or they might gossip or get really jealous, things like that, that kind of are cues that this might be a stormy relationship. Then we added something in here. Oh, and of course, talking about stormy relationships, there's an element in there about bullying and how to identify bullying and prevent bullying by recognizing your own behavior. And one way we do that is to talk about the do's and don'ts of handling people you don't like. So what do you do when you just don't click with someone, or maybe they annoy you, but you know, you want to make sure you're not being overtly stormy in their life. You don't want to bring a storm cloud to them. So there is a brief discussion of what to do in those situations so that you are bringing a sunny skies into their life instead of making it worse. And then finally, the sunny versus stormy group activity is really intentional. So there's some research showing that if you take children who are in different peer hierarchy levels, like a popular student versus a withdrawn student, if you put them into mixed status groups and have them work on tasks together, it can help break down some of that social hierarchy and make the group feel more inclusive. And so we were very intentional in making sure that this group activity is randomly assigned, so students are mixed up, and then they each have an equally important role. So let me show you on the next slide what this looks like. This is an opportunity for them to practice the concepts of sunny versus stormy together. So what they'll receive are little cards with scenarios on them. So like this green card here, they tell you that you're a good listener. And these cards, they're going to have to identify whether they go in the sunny column or stormy column. And as a group, they each have a role. So the guide is going to tell the person who's blindfolded, so they can't read and they can't talk, they're just the hands. They're just going to move the cards around. So the guide is going to tell them where to go. The reader is the only person who can read the card. And after reading it, the guide has to say, okay, I think that's sunny. Hands, put it in that column. Oh, not quite. Yep, there you go. That's the right column. And so that is the thing that they're going to be doing for about 5 minutes to see how fast they can sort the cards. Again, just an active learning option to really help them work together on their different roles. Of course, afterwards, they do a processing discussion, and one of the key questions there is, how did each person contribute to achieving your goal, with that idea of kind of equalizing everyone in the group. So this is one of the main activities in lesson 4. So let me next show you an example of another key lesson element. This is our facilitator connection. So this will happen throughout each lesson. As Vanessa said, it's really crucial and integrated throughout all of our the whole program. So there's always an opportunity for a facilitator ahead of time to think through what their examples might be. So for instance, trait number 1 of a sunny relationship is that you can be you, staying true to yourself without feeling pressured to change or be fake. So the facilitator example, my example would be that when I was that age, when I was like 10 or 11, I loved basketball. I lived and breathed basketball. And so I had a friend, Natalie, who took up basketball with me. She just tried it. She would shoot hoops with me. And it made me feel really like happy and accepted that she showed interest in something that I was really passionate about. Done. So just a really quick example for each trait throughout this lesson. But that's what facilitator connections look like, usually with a prompt underneath that says like, this is what the example should be. And in some cases with facilitator connections that are a little more tricky, we do add in some examples that could be drawn upon. So that is lesson 5, and that's an example of lesson 4, and that's an example of a facilitator connection. So lesson 5 aligns with it's called I Am a Friend. I'm looking at the wrong thing. I Am Healthy. This is aligned with the positive youth development principle of competence, basically your ability to make good decisions for yourself. So having a mastery of a variety of domains in your life, and that you just feel capable and confident in your abilities. Specifically within this lesson, we want to build their ability to avoid risky situations. And that could look like a lot of things during this age group, but basically they're going to delve into how to know that they're in a risky situation and what to do to protect themselves to stay healthy. So there is a thing in here that we call the boundary toolbox. That's a tool that allows students to practice deciding what to say or do in different scenarios that might be risky or uncomfortable. So next slide, please. So overall, the goal here is to help them make good choices, avoid risk, and learn how to practice setting boundaries. So overall, what's happening in this lesson, we're going to have a discussion about boundaries, and the facilitator, of course, gives an example of how when you have an intention for something like avoiding alcohol, you're probably also going to have some boundaries around that. Like if you intend to not drink alcohol, you would also be able to say, no, thank you, I don't want that, or I'm not interested, and that would be your boundary. We also talk about how just like our conscience can be our guide, that gut feeling or intuition can also help guide us to make safe, healthy decisions. So we use the analogy of an inner bodyguard protecting you, and this bodyguard will speak up, right? Whenever you get sweaty palms, your heart is racing, or just a sinking feeling in your stomach, that might be a sign that your bodyguard is letting you know that you need protection and it's time to set a boundary. So then they do a boundary toolbox activity, which focuses a lot on nonverbal communication and what you would say or do in situations. After that activity, which I'll show you in just a moment, there is a very important conversation about accepting other people's boundaries. It can be really tough to listen when you really want to do something and a friend says no to you. So we go through how to identify why you're feeling upset or frustrated, however, to never pressure somebody past their boundary. So next I want to show you the boundary toolbox that students can use during the activity. Basically what happens is in pairs that they choose, they're going to read a scenario. So an example here is you've been feeling insecure about your body recently. A friend comments on your weight and how much you're eating. What would you do and what would you say in that situation to set a boundary? Like you don't want them making comments about that. So what would you do? So the participant would pick from each column something they could say or do in that situation. This is really just to get those wheels turning and give them some verbiage, some language to be able to put in their back pocket in case something comes up in the future in a variety of different types of scenarios that we give them out. All right, so that's our boundary toolbox activity. The next thing that I want to show you is an example of the lesson takeaway. This does happen in all of our lessons. At the end, kind of like at the beginning, it's called preview. We preview what's going to happen. We reviewed what happened in the last lesson, and then we review by having them think about what they learned today. So what are you going to remember, and write this down in your student journal so that you can take it with you and think through what you learned, what stood out to you. So that is an example of our lesson takeaway example.
So this is the last lesson of the program, and it is I am a leader. And this lesson aligns with the positive youth development principle of contribution. And so why this is important is our young people have learned so much about having healthy relationships and building these relationship skills, and they've learned a lot about themselves and their well-being. And so they have this great opportunity to then contribute by teaching others what they've learned. And so we know that contributing helps foster a sense of purpose and social responsibility. And this idea is really underscored in the lesson by saying, like, you have something to share. You have an opportunity here to be a leader by advocating for having healthy relationships in your community. And so we delve into the interpersonal leadership. We examine qualities of leaders who have had a positive influence and impacted their communities. We show how to be actively involved in their school community, how to have a sense of empowerment, how to have a sense of belonging by fostering healthy relationships within this school environment. And so although specifically, being active and engaging and being a leader can sometimes be thought of as like an adult thing, an adult responsibility, we have an opportunity here in lesson 6 for students to get involved and for them to be a leader by strengthening ideas and messaging around having healthy relationships. So at the start of this lesson, there's a quick review about the classroom commitment that the students came up with on day 1. And so they get to assess, how did we do as a group? Did we meet our goal? Did we stick with those intentions that we set to create this positive classroom environment? And then they walk through an activity on, what is leadership? And we brainstorm ideas about, what's the difference between someone who is a leader versus someone who is bossy, meaning someone whose actions aim to control others or are someone who's coming from actions that are meant to get their way versus being a leader. And so after doing this, you can give an example as a facilitator of, someone who's been a leader and a leader that you admire. And then these leaders really with the characteristics of being a positive influence in some kind of way. And then we share stories of leadership, we give examples of leadership. Students have an opportunity to create their own leadership statements through the journal. And then the really fun activity here is getting to create positive messages and posting them or sharing them in some kind of way. And there's a lot of room here for how the message gets out. It could be, go outside, write positive messages on the sidewalk. It could be creating signs or flyers that are posted, on a bulletin board, in the bathrooms. It could be, in collaboration if it's in a school setting or community setting, sharing some kind of messaging on the morning news. There's a lot of opportunities, but that's the main thing here is now let's take what we've learned and let's pass it on. And then the last element that we want to share with you all, a key element, is the student journals. And so throughout the entire program, students have been also monitoring their feelings. And so here's an example of a journal response is, how do you feel right now? And so they've been doing that since lesson 2. And then here they get an opportunity to see, okay, like how have my feelings been tracking? How have they changed? Have they maintained pretty consistent? No right or wrong answer. It's just that awareness piece again. And then bringing it back to, well, do you have certain feelings? Are there certain patterns after being around a certain person? Do I feel energized? Do I feel tired? Do you feel confused? Maybe noticing how you feel after certain activities. So maybe they're coming to your program, after being in school or after some kind of practice, or, kind of thinking about what they're doing after, maybe it's the end of the day or the beginning of the day. And so really walking our young people through recognizing how they feel and how certain circumstances or contexts, how they feel after being in those environments. And then hopefully to help them make better decisions about, where they spend their time or who they spend their time with or what they spend their time doing. Excited because Alyssa's going to jump in here.
Yeah, hey. Thanks, Vanessa. So that wraps up all of our lessons. So what did the youth think about this project, this program? So we had 2 schools in Wyoming pilot this program about a year ago with a few different classes of students. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to share some of their qualitative feedback or their comments about what they liked about the program. And so you can see here that, our push for having active learning was noted. That idea that your own self-regulation can impact other people, right, through that classroom commitment. A student picked up on that in the second quote there. This idea of the feelings wheel, and one student said that it was inspiring, which I think is sweet, helping them to become a better human. Basically, our goal to have a holistic approach to healthy relationships, I think is shown in some of these comments. Learn how to respect others and yourself, right? We know that feeling good about yourself will impact other people and your relationships. So a student definitely picked up on that. And on the next slide, we have comments about what they thought that their facilitator did well. So in this case, it was a classroom teacher, but again, it could be a facilitator in after-school program or out of school time. But we wanted to know, what did they pick up on related to these things we built into the program, right? So we have all this co-regulation and facilitator connections built in. Did students pick up on these things? And so I think some of these quotes do point to the fact that our teachers in the piloting were able to really convey that they were relatable. They basically said that she shared personal stories and admitted to the wrong things that she did. That shows that she was very relatable. And there was an instance that's built in there where the teacher is supposed to say, I was disappointed in my behavior because, and here's what I learned about it, right? So, we focused a lot on how positive our program is and it's strength-based, but there are times where we say not everyone's perfect and here are the problems or mistakes that maybe have been experienced by the facilitator. So we wanted to see, of course, with facilitator co-regulation, having someone who connects with their youth by making them feel respected, listened to, cared for. And so some of these quotes really point to that, that she listened to what we had to say. This one really pulls on my heartstrings. As Vanessa said, we want the facilitator to serve as a champion. We don't want any child to not have a champion. And so that happened in this instance. And then teaching just general life lessons and having the teacher share stories that go with the lessons. So it's not as simple as just delivering the content in the program. There's a more personal layer to it that's built into the program in very small but intentional ways throughout. So that's the qualitative or commentary feedback we got from the youth about the project or about the program. At this time, the next thing I want to do is something that is what we ask our students to do. So the next slide has my key question for you today, which is, just like in our emerging relationship lessons, what is something that you'll take away from this webinar? What will you remember from this presentation, or what will you remember about the program? So take a moment and think about that.
And if you'd like, Alyssa, they can submit their responses to the question in the question box, which might seem counterintuitive, but if y'all write it in the question box, we'll be able to see those responses.
All right, sounds good. Well, on that note, you can keep thinking about what you'll remember, but on that note, let's move on and, have an opportunity for any questions that you have about the program. And Vanessa can jump back on and we can answer any questions that you throw at Rachel.
I know I'm like waiting for the flood of things that people are going to say, take in, and like trying to.
I'm excited.
It'll be great. It'll be great. So we are starting to get those responses in, but as those have time to come in, I wanted to get to one of the questions that we received, which is, how is emerging relationships distinct from, maybe more generic SEL interventions?
I'm sorry, I want to make sure I heard you clearly. How is it different from SEL, like social emotional learning?
Yes, sorry. Yeah. How is it distinct from like a generic social emotional learning intervention? I guess what makes it unique?
So I think one of the major things that we've built in that I think is unique is that specific connection between the teacher and the students. So that is, interwoven throughout each of the lessons. And so I think that that kind of adds value by creating that co-regulation piece.
Vanessa, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sure. Just to build on what, Alyssa's sharing too, it's building, of course, that awareness of emotions but also within the context of this age group, we really focus a lot on building those healthy relationships with peers. A little bit more, we hone in on that relationship piece more than maybe like a more broad SEL approach would, and thinking about things like for age appropriate, like what do you do when you have someone that you don't like, but you still have to like how to not be someone's friend and be polite and be nice. So being aware of feelings and how we impact others in the context of relationships specifically. And so building in that communication piece and a lot of what Alyssa shared too with like lessons 3 and 4 and 5, where it's healthy relationships and boundary setting and that communication piece.
I do love that. Oh, sorry.
I have one thing I'd add as well. So this came to mind while Vanessa was talking, that one of the things we did in creating this research-based program is we looked ahead to middle and late adolescence and identified what kinds of precursors lead to dating aggression or sexual coercion, the negative things we don't want in romantic relationships later on. And we were able to find the peer and early adolescent precursors, like the red flags happening then, and target those. So even though in our program we may not be talking about romantic attractions, and we really are focusing on these things that we know will later on help to prevent negative outcomes.
I love that. Like you said, it's that prevention piece more so than the intervention
for relationships.
I think Vanessa, a great point about there's a lot of programs that teach you how to build healthy relationships and like how to create these friendships. And what if there is somebody that you don't get along with? Like, how do we navigate that? And what does that look like in healthy and safe and respectful ways, even when that might be a little more difficult?
Yeah.
So I will say lots of people are coming in through the chat, about things that they're taking away, how to help set boundaries, love the champion connection, that the lessons begin with the I statement, the concepts of the journals, positive youth development principle that's very clearly aligned with each lesson. Someone said I was expecting to hear about Maslow's hierarchy, but you definitely sent me on a different route. So I think that was a good sharing personal stories and admitting wrongs from what I've learned and like how I've learned from that. They are excited that there's a program that they can facilitate with younger youth. It's perfect for 10 to 12-year-olds. Love to focus on leadership. So lots of great things here. I did get to a question. So one of the questions is, do you think that, socially in the social emotional space that young kids might be a little more behind now because of COVID? What do you think basically the effect of COVID, or what might be the impact of COVID on youth? Did y'all see any of that while you were doing the research?
I don't, we haven't caught up yet, or I don't know. I can say anecdotally I have 2 young children actually in this exact age group, and I can say it through conversations with their teachers. That's been a big focus in the classroom with teachers of like, how do we communicate? How can we be friends? How do we, because we did even just simple things like going to school and wearing masks and like, how do you communicate clearly? But that's just anecdotally. I didn't see anything like that in the research.
Like you said, it might take time for the one great and unfortunate thing about research is once it comes out that
it's happening. We're just,
People like that you're empowering students. Can the program be offered in a second language such as Spanish? So right now it's not currently, but it doesn't mean that that isn't a possibility for the future, that there might be the opportunity for translating the curriculum. So I will say that on our end at least. Someone said I learned that it's okay and even encouraged to share these age-appropriate personal experiences, so that other, additional way to connect with their youth and create safe and authentic spaces. I like the caring and empathy lesson. Boundaries toolbox is really great. Again, the connection to positive youth development. Okay, here we go. So someone wants to know, Shirley wants to know, what is the response from teachers to the program? Are there teachers who decline using the program because of workload challenges? So what are you kind of hearing from teachers with this?
Overall, very accepting of the program. The teachers, in fact, like I think many of you in the audience today, want a program for healthy relationship skills for this age group. So they've been waiting for it. So the teachers in Wyoming that we were in contact with were really eager to have something like this to implement, because it aligns so well with many of their existing teaching standards. And so it checks those boxes for them in terms of teaching. And so in general, we didn't have any reticence to uptake of the program when we were piloting. In general, I think the feedback from teachers that I received was that, they found that the focus on the positives and the strengths for youth was really helpful. They thought it was unique for them to share their personal experiences and examples. And just the activity level of each lesson, right? So that active learning was something that helped keep the students engaged, that's why we did it. So that was good to hear.
Let's see. Interesting questions about research being done in urban settings. I mean, that is the ideal, right? We'd like to see more research and get more research on this program. So, Derek, maybe we'll talk after this webinar is done. I've got other folks saying that they're really interested in this because they hear so much from teachers about the social lag due to COVID. So it seems like this might be a great opportunity. Let me see. Would this curriculum work with the special needs population? If so, what age and grade level do we think this might translate to? Any thoughts on that?
It's inclusive, because even things like with the powered pause and different activities, we made facilitator notes throughout the program so that there are different opportunities for how, so if it's like sensory or if there's physical or just any like other different kinds of needs, so we can adapt the activities. And the activities themselves, it's pretty, as far as like technology and that kind of thing goes, it is pretty low tech. So it's something that's like, hey, let's take this outside, right? Let's do this program, like it's a pretty day, or we can do it at the park. Like it can be done in different kinds of settings. So I think those are just examples. There's adaptability to it.
Yeah.
So of course, knowing your students, knowing their needs, I think there's a lot of opportunity to adapt the activities themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Alyssa, I know you're very mindful of that for every lesson. So if you want to
we made sure to include facilitator notes that would describe ideas that we had. But like Vanessa said, you all know your participants the best in how to adapt your program. The program also could be done more slowly if that's what's needed, slower processing times as the lesson's being taught. Doing it a little slower would maybe be the right thing. But just in general, we try to be inclusive and aware of a variety of different needs that young people have, like Vanessa mentioned, like sensory needs, past history of trauma, like not being blindfolded if you don't want to be, like you don't have to be the blindfolded person in that activity. Just being really explicit about those things throughout the program.
Those are great points, and it's very clear that y'all took those pieces into consideration, and that's something that as people hopefully go through training for this program and we engage them in more conversations, we can talk about what those adaptations might look like. So unfortunately, even though I see some more questions coming in at the end, don't worry, we will get to you. So if your question did not get answered today, we will follow up with you and make sure your questions are answered. There is one that I want to make sure to highlight briefly. So somebody asked where you can access the program. You can find it on our website, and that is at www.dibbleinstitute.org. We'd also love to send you a digital review copy, so please make sure that you stay on when this webinar ends, and please reply to the survey that we have. We appreciate everybody being here today. We hope that you're even more excited about this new program from what I'm seeing in the question and answer box. It seems like you are. So if you want to learn more about it, let us know. We'd be happy to send you a digital review copy. Another thing I want to highlight is currently there is 20% off, so 20% pre-production discount if you order by May 31st. We'll be sending out copies starting early June. So go ahead and get that order and save yourself that 20%. And get ready to start implementing this program with your young people. 6 lessons, 6 hours-ish, like Alyssa said, and Vanessa said, a little longer, a little shorter, depends on what your needs are. But we look forward to working with you as you begin to utilize this program in your setting. So thank you, Vanessa, thank you, Alyssa, and we'll see y'all again in a month at our next Wednesday webinar, back to our regularly scheduled programming. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.